I'm Peter Byck, and I just want to thank everyone at the Metcalf Institute for bringing me here, Peggy and Henry Sharp for making this possible on a number of levels. I am a documentary filmmaker and a filmmaker. I made an environmental film in the 90s called Garbage. So it was about garbage problems across the United States, and we actually made it kind of funny. And that's the way I look at the world. If I don't laugh, I'm in trouble. And when I started learning about climate change in a deep way in 2007, I realized this was a serious problem. I was unaware of it. And along with the 3 film producer partners of mine, we decided to make a film about climate change. And the one thing that I insisted on was that it be light, was that it have a light touch. So that was sort of our overall thing, to make a film about solutions to climate change. We had films about the problem that were done very, very well. And a lot of times documentary films, especially from the environment, they can be pretty bleak. And climate change itself is very bleak. And so our goal was to see if we could find a way to make a film that wasn't bleak. And I can tell you many times during the making of the film, that seemed like it was going to be an impossible task, like we were going to have to manipulate the footage too much. Then just the idea of documentaries themselves, I mean, as I was raised watching documentaries in school, they all felt like the truth, capital T. You had a narrator, you had imagery, and you believed it because it was a documentary and it had to be true. So I'm going to talk about that whole idea of objectivity and things like that. And also to talk about just whether what you're watching is true. How do you know? How do you find that out? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys clips from the film. And the film is a 90-minute movie. It was world premiered in March 28th in DC, and it took us 3 years to make. We started shooting April 2nd, 2007, so it was almost exactly 3 years from first day of shooting to the world premiere. So you're going to see excerpts from the film. They're going to be out of context in a way, and they're going to be out of order. So I'm not trying to create the experience of watching the film. I'm just going to use clips to demonstrate stuff. So this first clip is just simply looking for solutions, looking for an interesting message, looking for an interesting messenger, because as we study films about climate, environmental films, if you don't have a good messenger, you're also going to be hurting, and you're not going to get an audience. So those were our overall goals for this film.
Wind is a renewable resource. It also renews lives. In Pennsylvania's rejuvenated Rust Belt, laid-off steelworkers are now hired to make turbines. And down in West Texas, wind is turning dirt into gold.
Are you getting lots of wind noise here? That's supposed to be, that's supposed to fit right in the picture, wind noise and wind mark.
Cliff saw wind turbines popping up all around his cotton farm and decided to get a piece of the action before it blew away.
All of the developers that I approached initially were accustomed to doing business in the large ranches. Lots of land, 1 or 2 owners.
My father felt that if you look around the area around here, most of the land is owned by small family farmers. And the last 20 or 30 years have been difficult for family farmers, and that was the primary reason why he became interested in trying to get a wind development project.
We had lots of owners and lots of small tracts of land, and there was a natural resistance doing all that contract stuff. But once I was able to convince the developers that the actual construction cost on this wonderful flat farmland with county roads everywhere would be an absolute minimum, then they began to take notice and was able to make this happen. You might could say I did it all single-handedly. stripper in 1972. I was 30 years old. It really wasn't such a traumatic situation for me. I just decided that I was going to take it on as a challenge and worked out okay. Been very fortunate. I think that global warming is readily accepted, and most farmers are good stewards of the land, and they're wanting to see something done about it, contribute to it. Look at that. Got something?
Before the turbines, things were bleak in Roscoe.
When I graduated from high school, I mean, most of the people that grew up here, they couldn't wait to get out of town and go to the big city. Not because they didn't love this area, but mainly because there were so few opportunities.
For Roscoe, I guess we bottomed out when we lost our Dairy Queen.
Oh yeah, that's a kiss of death for a small town. When your Dairy Queen closes down, you're on your last leg.
But about that time, our wind industry came along, and it's been a fantastic, unbelievable boom to Roscoe.
A very
Hold on a second. Yeah, okay. So one thing in particular that we shot this footage in June of 2008. I've seen it a million times. And it wasn't until just a recent screening that I realized that when Cliff waved to that other farmer, that he wasn't driving with his hands. And it never dawned on me until then. My wife was driving behind us. She's a producer on the film. And I mentioned that to her, and she goes, "Oh, no, I thought that the whole time." So this was, when we started this film, this story was exactly it. Great message, a town being rejuvenated by clean energy, great messenger. It was exactly what we wanted, and this was, again, my wife found this story. I said, "I think there's wind going on in West Texas, and we're going to El Paso for an algae story. Can you find something?" And I didn't realize at the time that West Texas was from El Paso to Dallas, which is about 500 miles, and he's about 2 hours outside of Dallas. So it was a heck of a drive to go from our algae story to the wind story. But the big question here is sort of an overview is, what you've just seen, is it objective? Is that objective filmmaking? Is that objective storytelling? Is that objective journalism? No, it's not at all. Not one bit. And I'll say that there is no such thing as an objective movie. I don't know how there is, because someone's picking the subject matter, someone's picking the subject, someone's picking the place to put the camera, when to turn it on, when to turn it off, what pieces of the footage to put in, what pieces of the footage not to put in, what order, what music. I mean, there's nothing objective about that. And so I think that might be a difference, because I know print journalism strives for objectivity. I guess there's an argument of whether that's ever possible as well, but I know for films, I think when someone says they're making an objective film, I don't even know what that means, to be honest with you. With all the years I've spent in editing rooms, making people say stuff that, that they might not have said when I was working for clients who demanded me to do that. Wind, we shot a lot of footage for this piece. This is 3 minutes, the piece is 5 minutes. I spaded it a little sooner than the ending. We shot probably 5 hours of footage for this one story. We shot Cliff, we shot his son, we shot a woman who owns a gift shop whose business is booming now. We shot an owner of a restaurant whose business is booming. We even shot a whole other wind farm, which is, he refers to big ranchers and stuff like that. We shot a whole other piece. And so that's 5 hours of footage to get to 5 minutes. Obviously, stuff's going to hit the editing room floor. Sometimes it's really good, and that's really hard. When you make a film and all of a sudden you've got a 2-hour film and you know it needs to be 80 minutes. You spent 2 years making it 2 hours because you picked the things you like. So we had a lot of that kind of squeezing towards the end. But one story that's really interesting that happened here that's not in the movie is wind farms are usually out where people don't live. I mean, the wind resource is usually out where people don't live because no one wants to live in a windy area. And same with solar. So the big issue is bringing the transmission lines to get that power from the resource way out in the middle of nowhere back into the city, and there's huge fights about getting transmission lines built. No one wants it through the property, it's unsightly, blah, blah, blah. But what happened with Cliff, and this is a really lucky break for him, is that he's 2 hours west of Dallas. There was a natural gas plant that was going to be built there in the 80s, and it got so far that they already built the transmission lines. So he just had empty transmission lines, or transmission lines with enormous amount of potential capacity, just sitting there. So that's why his thing was such an appealing piece to the big companies that then put money in. It's just like that. There's always an interesting story. Another thing that's really interesting about documentaries, beyond being subjective, is there is no fact-checking anything for documentaries. There's no institute, there's no grading, there's no board, there's nothing. And so when you're watching a documentary, you're just trusting the filmmakers, or trusting the people who paid for the documentary. That's all it is. And so the idea that the documentaries are made to feel so true is a real interesting phenomenon, really, because you can question everything. And I feel like you should question everything. And what we did, because we as a film company believe that climate change is real. We also believe that there's a lot of people who want to destroy any message, any film that carries that message. So we wanted to be really careful about what we said, and you heard the narrator, well, that's stuff that we wrote. So everything we wrote, we have 3 sources, at least, to back it up of why we say that. Someone can argue with anything anyone says ever. You can be sued for anything in this country. So, you know, nothing is a capital T truth in this film or any film, really, but we wanted to back that up, and what we'll do on our website, once we get this thing on a national release, which is going to be in the fall, we hope, is to publish the 300-page document that contains all of those sources. So that'll be a great resource for anyone researching this stuff, and it'll also show that we back up what we say and we mean it, and we're trying to have journalistic integrity. No one told us we had to do that. There's no law. And what's interesting is there was a paper done for the Center for Social Media. It came out last September. It's called Honest Truths, Documentary Filmmakers on Ethical Challenges in Their Work. And what they did was they talked to filmmakers and told them it would be anonymous, you can tell us anything. And it was filmmakers who had at least 2 nationally released films, whether they were public or private broadcast. And the biggest one that I heard this story on, I think it was NPR or PRI in the fall, and it was just interesting. March of the Penguins. Most people here have seen that film, I would guess? The crux of that film is that penguins mate for life. And that's not true. They mate for a season. And some of them don't live more than a season, so you can say that that penguin mated for life because it only lived 1 season. And so, you know, did the filmmakers think that if they said it mated for a season, that wouldn't be enough for humans to be compelled? Or would that truth have been enough? All those decisions they made to push it that way is choices they made, and I was hooked, and I was hoodwinked. 15% of penguins mate for life, but you don't know is it because they only live. So that's one film. There's another story they tell us about a cable show. They don't give the name of the filmmaker or the film. Nature show where they have to show, I don't know what kind of animal was the hunter, but it has to show the hunter killing a rabbit. They need that shot. And they weren't getting it. And the sun's going down and their budget's spent and they're not going to be there the next day. And there are intense pressures when you make a film to get the shot, no matter what kind of film. Narrative film, documentary film. It is tense because if you don't get it, you don't have anything to show anyone. And what happened was the wrangler of the animals, this is kind of gross, decided to break the rabbit's leg so that it was slow enough so that their prey, their hunter, could get it, so that they could get the shot before the sun went down. And it's like, is that something we should know as a viewer? And the filmmaker expresses a lot of regret that he let that happen at this point in their paper. There's another one that's kind of funny. I don't know the context, but it's a historical documentary where this filmmaker needed a lot of photographs of the family back in the 1800s. And nothing existed, he couldn't find anything. So he went to a flea market and found photographs that would look like the family in the same time period, and just used fake, photographs that were real at the time, but had nothing to do with the subjects. Again, it's telling a story. How important is that? How not important is that? There's a lot of other issues with documentaries as well. It's like, do you allow the people you're filming to have editorial control of the piece of film that they're in? Has anyone heard of Angeline? Okay, I'll drop it. Basically, it's this bimbo B movie star in LA who, I don't know what she's done, but she gets a lot of billboards. And someone wanted to make a film about her, and she demanded that she have complete control over the final cut. And that was the deal they made. Her husband paid for the film, and so that was their agreement. For us, we filmed a lot of companies and a lot of people, and they all asked if they could have, a say in what was shown. And we said no to everybody. There was one story we really wanted to get, and that was the greening of the Empire State Building. And when we were tracking that story, it wasn't publicly known. We had filmed people who were working on it, but it hadn't been announced yet. And so the owner of the Empire State Building was it was the hardest negotiation for any film thing I've done. It was amazing. Back and forth with me, and my lawyer, and their lawyer, just to film a day. And basically the owner wanted to make sure that he was in the movie. And I said, I can't say that you will or won't be, but I definitely will film an interview with you in good faith. You just don't know what's going to make it. And I didn't want to have that restriction, so I won that battle, but he said that he had to see the cut of the piece we cut ourselves before he would approve it being in the film, and that we absolutely couldn't show it to anyone until they made their announcement to put out the thing. Well, this is a good reason why our film took longer than we expected to make, because he took a lot longer than he expected to make the news public. And the way that worked out was we cut the piece, I sent it to him, he loved it, and that was that. So we didn't have the problem. I don't know what I would have done if he would have said, I don't like that fact, you got to take it out. I don't know what I would have done, honestly. But I didn't have to have that problem. But on the other side of the coin, we vetted this film for a number of scientists, policy people, experts, and those vetting sessions over a year basically directed a lot of what's in the film now. So there's it's for me, it's like I don't want to be told what I have to put in, but I certainly want to be told what's inaccurate, and that's how that process worked. There's the issue of, do you pay people to be in your film? And there's this rule in news broadcasts, you can't pay your subject, and then you find out someone paid someone in some scandal story, and oh my gosh, and stuff like that. And for us, we weren't asked to pay anybody, and I don't think I've ever been asked to pay anybody in a film. But I read in the study, it made sense. It was, if you're filming someone who's, let's say they've been fired from their job because they're a whistleblower and that's what you're filming, then maybe you should pay them for that week that they're working for you. You're making money making the film. So it's a real interesting gray area that, again, there's no rules anywhere. It's just a question of what the filmmaker wants to do. So the idea of all that truth and stuff. So we shot over 200 hours of footage. We're making a 90-minute movie. We interviewed 326 people. 326 people were interviewed in the film. I didn't realize that until we counted at the end when we were making the credits for the end credit roll. And about 60 made it into the final film. Interviews average 45 minutes to an hour with one-on-one interviews. So obviously a lot of stuff is not there. But everything everyone says in our film is exactly in the context that they said it in the interview. And what I alluded to before, I've done a lot of work for the studios where we're doing these promos, where you're having an actor talk about how great the film experience was, and then you put it on a commercial or, things like that, and you put it on the end of DVDs of how they made the film. And there's something called a Frankenbite, which is basically cobbling together parts of words to finish a word, to finish a phrase, to finish a sentence. So it is absolutely doable and seamlessly to your ear to do, to be observed. You can make someone say anything. I've done it. And so I wanted to make sure in this film, because my editor, who was on for the first 15 months of editing, and I have worked on those shows, and we just sort of said, we're not doing that. It always bugged us to do it for clients, and we're like, we're not doing that. And so, easy for me to tell you that, but again, what our plan is to put all the interviews up online, so that anyone can watch these interviews, because they're kind of interesting. If you want to learn more, you can see the hour and a half interview we had with Richard Branson, and I talked about all kinds of stuff. And that's pretty cool. And there's this executive who's the CEO of Exelon Energy. It's this company that's the biggest nuclear fleet in the country. And he's got very interesting ideas about a price on carbon, energy efficiency. He's a really smart guy. We used 3 bites from him in the movie, but there's an hour interview with him. It's pretty cool. So we want to be able to put that up there. So that's one of our goals in our marketing and distribution, is to have these things up for anyone to use in any way they'd like. And if it's a not-for-profit, they can actually use the footage in their piece for free. So we've been given a great gift from our donors, and we want to be able to give that out. So instead of trying to be objective, we reveled in being subjective. We loved that. We could sort of do anything we wanted, and we wanted to make sure people knew that we wanted to make something different. We wanted to have a different point of view, and try to make a film that wasn't such a downer. Because so many environmental films are downers, and it makes sense, but another thing that we were looking for is to take the politics out of this issue. For me, in all the studies I've done, there is no politics in this issue. That's a superimposed thing that doesn't have anything to do with CO2, doesn't have anything to do with the science of it, or, hey, we're burning coal, hey, we're digging up coal. The politics comes in afterwards. And that, to me, was something that was, I wanted to see if we could just sort of do away with that in the way we told the story. Was that possible? And so, we're going to show a couple more clips, and you're going to, just looking for this. So here we go. This one's pretty quick.
A very quick history of climate change. Invention of the steam engine spurred on the Industrial Revolution and big-time use of coal. Irish physicist Tyndall showed that water vapor, CO2, and other gases cause the greenhouse effect. Swedish chemist Arrhenius explained industrial-age coal enhanced the greenhouse effect. U.S. oceanographer Rhode revealed oceans could not absorb all this extra CO2 as many had assumed. U.S. chemist Keeling proved CO2 levels were rising fast. President Johnson's science panel threatened that the greenhouse effect was a real concern. British Prime Minister and chemist Margaret Thatcher sternly warned of dangerous global warming. And British economist Nicola Sturgeon cautioned ignoring climate change could cost 20% of worldwide GDP. Tackling it would cost 1%. Or as Ben Franklin said, a stitch in time saves 9.
And so, obviously I used the Ben Franklin thing out of context. He never knew about this problem. At least I never read anything that suggested that he knew about this problem. We showed the film in Louisville, my hometown, and something that I've been surprised by is, everyone says, what's your market? And any filmmaker, when they're asked that question, the first thing they think is, everybody. You're not making a film for 3 people, you're making it for everyone. But I never thought our film would work for people under high school age. And I didn't think about making it for them. And it turns out that it is. In the screenings we've had, middle school kids are really getting it. And there was this 10-year-old girl that was at our screening in Louisville, and a friend of mine was sitting right next to her and said she laughed at every joke, she got it, and I had to speak to this 10-year-old girl, so I walked over to her. I said, "Did you really understand the whole film?" She goes, "Yeah, except for one thing." I'm like, "What's that?" She goes, "A stitch in time saves 9. I don't know what that means." And then I told her, stitch, you rip it, it gets bigger, and she goes, "Oh, so like when you have a fire, you don't put it out right away." And I'm like, You got it. So it's kind of interesting how this subject matter, I actually think maybe what I'm getting is, you know, the schools are really teaching a lot of this stuff now, so the kids are probably more prepared to learn it quicker now. It's what I'm getting from people who have kids that are in elementary school. My kid's 18 months old, so he'll get it. The first day of shooting for the film was April 2nd, 2007. I was invited by a friend to go to Arizona State University because Al Gore was going to present his slideshow. And I'd seen Inconvenient Truth, and Inconvenient Truth was what woke me up. And I was charged when I saw the movie, but when I saw the slideshow again, I was kind of bummed out, you know, because there wasn't any additional solution, and even in a slideshow, even after people had said, we really want solutions. So I was curious about that, and that was a choice, and we obviously were making a choice of solutions. And the first people we interviewed, the first person I interviewed, was a planetary geologist. He's a guy who has a lot of instruments that are on the Mars rovers and stuff like that. And I asked him, I said, when was it that you first heard about climate change? When were you starting to get it? And he was a grad student at UCLA in the 70s. And he said he would see papers or see just information about carbon, getting, you know, too much carbon in the air, warming up the atmosphere. He just thought the Earth is too big, the oceans are too vast. There's no way that this could do, you know, that humans could affect the whole planet. And then the Viking mission to Mars started sending photographs back, and they were observing how events at the poles were affecting events at the equator, and he realized that was a system. And then he thought, well, if Mars is a system, the Earth is a system. And that's when he had his aha moment. So that influenced the way we started the film. So this is actually the beginning of the movie.
This is Earth. There's Venus, Mercury, and the Sun. Now, even though Mercury is twice as close to the Sun as Venus, Venus is the hotter planet. Why? Carbon dioxide, aka CO2. Venus's atmosphere is full of CO2, and the greenhouse effect has run amok. Since the Industrial Revolution, Earth's CO2 levels have been increasing sharply, and now we too are heating up. Granted, Earth's been hotter before and colder, but it's been about the same temperature for the last 10,000 years, which includes all of modern human achievement, like farming, pinatas, and frequent flyer miles. Climate change is happening. Is it fixable? What are the solutions? Who's working on this?
So, I really like frequent flyer miles, and I think that was a great human achievement. And so, really, what we wanted to establish was this thing about carbon has nothing to do with anyone on Earth. It's actually just science. It's happening on Venus. It's okay. And then we really wanted to show that we are not taking ourselves too seriously. You know, we wanted to make that clear from the very beginning. We wanted to make that clear from the title of our movie. And we want to make sure that our posters designed to make that clear. That we're not taking ourselves too seriously. And we wanted to have a big tent approach to this film. There's two groups, Live Earth and Cool Globes. Those two groups, you can check out their websites. They've been doing this with a really good sense of humor since I started this research and found them. And they were inspiring to me. Cool Globes was this program started by Wendy Abrams. It was basically getting 200 people to design these globes that all had the same, you know, sort of fiberglass globe. Companies sponsored them, and they put them all over Chicago, and each one had a solution to climate change, and then she made this book with each one of them. It was just fabulous. And Live Earth, they just did it really well. And so we knew that there was people doing this really well, and we hoped we could get to their level. Like I said earlier, I'm a lefty liberal, and we as a group, we whine too much, to me. I mean, we're a bunch, you know, there's a lot of whining going on, especially in my sector of the world. And I wanted to make sure that people knew that we as filmmakers don't consider ourselves innocent of using oil, using natural gas, using coal. We do. I flew so many miles making this film, and I didn't want to keep that, like, we're not coming off as we we're not using oil, so everyone's bad who uses it. It's just not where we were coming from. And we really I didn't make this film for myself. I made this film for my Uncle Phil, who, when I started the film, was sending me climate change denying articles. He was emailing these things from the Financial Times. And so I said, okay, I'm still making the movie. And then all of a sudden he leapfrogged past all that and says, well, even if climate change is real, we're not, what can you do? China and India are going to put so much carbon up in the air anyway, so it's futile. So why even try to fight it? And so he hasn't seen the film yet, but when he does, I hope to post his response up online. His college roommate saw the film, who was also sending me climate change denying articles. He liked it a lot. So it's a question of what kind of people are out there fighting this thing. Is it everyone you think it is?
We're at Chena Hot Springs. I'm Bernie Carl, and here's Bert and Ernie. They're our goats. Alaska has more geothermal energy than all the states put together. But yet Chena Hot Springs is the first geothermal power plant in the state of Alaska.
Gwen Holden is Bernie's chief engineer for energy projects.
I'm pregnant with twins right now. That's right, 6 months pregnant.
Gwen's main job with Bernie was exploring the potential of the Chena Hot Springs themselves.
What people were saying was that the 165 degree Fahrenheit water that we had wasn't high enough for generating power.
Your typical geothermal plant is operated at 250 F or greater. So you're really looking for very hot water or even steam.
I knew that I could make electricity from this water. And I brought in a drill rig and I started drilling well over it.
Before long, Bernie and Gwen did a successful test. At the same time, way back in Connecticut, giant manufacturer UTC Power was working on the same solution.
We needed 165, 200 degree water. We needed to go to Chena Hot Springs. There's 165 degree water coming out of the ground. That's where Bernie Carl comes in.
Now this power plant is making power off of water that's not as hot as McDonald's coffee.
We developed lower temperature technology, so you don't have to go after 300 or 400 degree water or steam.
This is working. We're doing it. I mean, the lights are on right now, geothermal. Now we're going to enter the largest ice structure in the world to be up all summer. Now Forbes magazine voted this the dumbest business idea of the year. Mr. Forbes can kiss my ass. Ice structure kept going geothermal. It cost me about $12 a day to refrigerate this place. If you did it on diesel fuel standard, it would be $750 a day. It's the cheapest thing going. Our electricity was costing us 30 cents a kW. Right now, we're at 5 cents a kW. In 3 to 4 years, will be 1 penny per kilowatt hour. We'll have the cheapest energy in the state of Alaska. People say, where do you stand on global warming? I said, well, if someone thinks there's not global warming, then they must have their head up their ass. I said, if you pull your head out and open your eyes, you'll notice the glaciers are melting. You will notice that the sea ice cap is almost gone. So, do you think there's global warming? Yes, there is. Do I think man is causing global warming? I think that we add to it. Do I think we're causing it? No. But that doesn't make any difference. I want clean water, I want clean air. And that's so simple.
Okay, so that was an epiphany. I never thought that someone who didn't believe in climate change would be doing everything I would do for different reasons, or the same, there was a common ground there that was a lot bigger than I ever anticipated. And to me, I think that this nugget of someone who doesn't even believe man's causing climate change, yet he's a pioneer in geothermal energy. I mean, Alaska has enormous research for geothermal power. He literally was the first person, as a single human being, to put a geothermal power plant in. And then UTC Power, this giant company, heard about him, we're trying to figure this out, and then partnered with him. So from that point on, I realized I wanted to keep my eyes open, and I also was thinking, who's my market? Again, my Uncle Phil, big tent. Let's get everybody in there. There's so many reasons to do these things even if you don't believe in climate change. And I didn't think that was possible when I started this film. I never would have come up with that. I was so surprised when you said that. And that's, I think, going to be one of the things that really gives us a unique place in the market. Like I was saying earlier, telling the truth in films, getting stories out that are happening is really important. In environmental filmmaking, a lot of it is to talk about atrocities. That's why the filmmakers are so compelled to tell the story. And so a lot of these films are bleak because the subject matter is bleak. And we were really hoping that we wouldn't make a bleak film. And like I said, I didn't know during the first year if that was possible. There was times when we were digging into this stuff, and there's a lot of research behind the filming, and so there's a lot of stuff that we've uncovered and read online, and it's overwhelming. The head of the Energy Foundation, who I understand is a supporter of this week, he called it climate change-induced depression, CCID, and it's a thing. And if you study it, it'll happen to you. And my editor, who had been on for about 4.5 months at that point, he actually wanted to quit. He couldn't handle all the information he was getting in. We hadn't filmed Bernie yet. We hadn't filmed the Wind Guy yet. And I said, I totally get it. I know exactly how you feel. I hope you stick it out because I think we're going to get some good stories, because my wife just came on board the film. It's going to get better, believe me. And that's pretty much what happened. For me, I didn't want people to want to slit their wrist when they're watching the film or want to slit someone else's wrist. For me, I perform much better when I'm inspired. I perform much better when I can laugh. And really the nugget for that realization came from my 10th grade biology teacher. He was just funny. I mean, we did stuff in his class, like dissecting fetal pigs, which was just like, come on. But he actually was funny about it. And I remember, and his name's Mr. Sled. I'll never forget him. And so I was remembering that, and that's what we were hoping to bring. And so our aspiration was to inspire people. And that's what we sought, and that's how we asked questions. And again, that's a complete subjective point of view. Nothing objective about it. I'm going to do something real quick.
Climate change is, in fact, a national security issue. We need to change how we think about this. This is no longer the purview of Birkenstock wearing tree huggers. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Fundamentally, we all understand we've got to get off our dependency on foreign oil.
The nations in the Middle East are more important now because of our desire for oil. If you take that out of the equation, then maybe the kind of spectrum of conflict we see ourselves in over there may change.
President George H.W. Bush would probably not have felt he had to protect Saudi Arabia from Iraq, with the Persian Gulf had been home to 2/3 of the world's proven supply of broccoli.
When you're moving large convoys, thin-skinned vehicles, transporting fuel, our enemies clearly understand how critical that is to us, and that is what they will attack.
We have to find ways to, as one Marine general likes to say, unleash ourselves from the tether of fuel.
Then the military won't need to fight over oil, and the warfighters, as you can imagine, really like that idea. Current Green Hawk and career badass Ben Noah headed up a task force to figure out ways to reduce military oil use.
Early on, we wanted to understand what was the real problem, what was the real challenge. And so we went out and we started visiting some of the forward operating bases, the FOBs.
A third of the Army's wartime fuel use is to run generator sets to make electricity. In a typical forward operating base recently examined, 95% of that electricity went to air-conditioned, inefficiently tents sitting in a very hot, sandy place.
If it was 120 degrees, with the air conditioning blowing in there, you might be able to get it down to 100 degrees. And really what we're doing is we're air conditioning the desert.
So we're getting people blown up in fuel convoys to deliver the fuel to be wasted in that way. Just connect the dots, and obviously there's something wrong with this picture.
We looked at what was currently available in terms of adding liners to tents and that sort of things, and then one of the folks on my team came up with the idea of spray foam insulation. This looks like a tent. The only difference, it doesn't move at all. Essentially, you've got a big igloo cooler here.
By foaming tents, we go from a 50-ton cooling unit down to a 8-ton cooling unit, which reduces our power consumption tremendously. We figured that within approximately 10 months, we will pay for everything. So we're actually saving soldiers' lives, giving them a more comfortable place to stay, and saving money and saving the environment all in that one fell swoop.
So that was pretty surprising when we discovered that the DoD was working really hard on that. I always thought it'd be a good idea to get the DoD involved because they're the biggest purse on the planet. If you put every defense budget of every country on one side of a scale, double it, you won't reach what we spend on defense. And, you know, this is kind of a jaw-dropping thing to find out. And so I thought, well, if they could spend a little money on this, they could really push this along. And later on in the piece, he talks about how microchips were developed by the DoD, and obviously they got a lot cheaper and things like that. You know, a big difference between print journalism and movies is you manipulate time and you manipulate sound. You know, that choice to have the truck explode with like very, very little sound is just an artistic choice. It's got nothing to do with the facts in the field of what's happening, but we get to do that, you know, and it's still a truthful shot, but we're still affecting it in an emotional way that's just subjective, you know, so it's another way of that subjectivity. Getting pretty close to the end here. You know, I wanted to talk just briefly about the serendipity of filmmaking, especially documentary filmmaking. It might be the way that we're making films, that I guess if you're making a film that's about a historical event, then you kind of know parameters and you can't just go around the world trying to find stories to fit that parameter. We would meet people who would introduce us to people who would introduce us to people, and things like that. It's just this web, not a chain, but a web of information. And an interesting one that's actually going to affect the marketing of the film is, I was at Lawrence Berkeley Laboratories. I was interviewing a scientist about forestry. I was getting ready to go to South Africa for a family trip. I said, do you know anybody there? He says, yeah, interview Peter Willis. He works with Cambridge University down there. Interview Peter Willis. And then I said, do you know anybody else? I'm going up to London. He goes, yeah, interview Polly Curtis. She's my boss. She works with Prince of Wales and runs this thing called the Business Environmental Program. Interview her. I then go interview her, and I'm heading back to LA where I used to live. And she said, oh, you got to meet Jean Brittingham. She runs our conferences in the US. And Jean invites me to present clips at the conference about 2 years ago. And this guy comes up to me and says, hey, I'm Steve Nave. I work for Walmart.com. I really like the clips. When you finish, let me know. And we screened the film for him, and he loves it, and he's going to sell our film on Walmart.com. And so it's like, not only is it how you get people in your movie and subjects, it's this great, it's like you just jump off a cliff.
Refrigerators under the Energy Star program are now 1/2 the price and use 1/4 the energy as their 1975 models. The real trick today is how we get rid of the old ones.
This is very typical of the average fridge we pick up. Utility companies have hired us to go out to customers' homes, pick these things up, verify that they work, bring them in here, and recycle over 95% of the materials that went into making them. Refrigerators are really bad environmental time limits. CFC 12, which is in the cooling circuit, that's what people typically call Freon, is 10,720 times greater a global warmer than CO2. We suck out the oil and the refrigerant, and we do that simultaneously. Then you take the polyurethane foam, which is in the insulation. In this refrigerator, you have 2.5 tons of CO2 equivalent just in the insulation. We did all this wonderful milling and heating and all that. What we wind up with is Freon R11 or CFC11. That is doomed for destruction, and that's what we do with it. When I was 20 years old, I started producing rock and roll concerts. I did everybody from Elvis to Sinatra and 2 tours of the Rolling Stones. Everybody goes, well, how do you go from rock and roll to refrigerators? And I said it was quite easy. It involved a jetty. Right after I did Rodney Dangerfield's U.S. tour, I went surfing after a hurricane and I hit a jetty, and I actually died. I drowned. And they brought me back to life, and I decided that I better do something different. As I'm out there going underwater and I'm going somewhere else, I said, leave me on Earth and I'll do something good for the world. And you know what? It was a life-changing event. Okay, these are grease monkeys, it looks like. Hi, Wayne. Good. Every refrigerator we pick up in this program is like taking 2 cars off the road for an entire year. 10 tons of CO2 equivalent. My father was an inventor. In fact, he invented the styrofoam ice chest, and some of his cohorts were actually the people that were responsible for polyurethane foam being used. So my father was responsible for putting those things out there, and I gotta go clean up their mess.
Well, I appreciate you all. Appreciate you all listening to the little bit of a story of how we made this movie. I'm definitely open for Q&A if there's time. I think there's a little time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Peter.
You mentioned that you have like 200 hours of videos and you're going to try to make those accessible. Is there any way to hot link the videos so that when you're watching a movie, you just click on the movie and it automatically stops the movie and takes you to the video?
That's an interesting thing. I know of a company that's creating hot links within videos so that if you see a windmill and you click on it, you go to the windmill's manufacturer. We're seeing if we can afford that service. What you just asked is very cool because then it would make it very easy to watch the rest of the interview. Right. We definitely want to make it cross-referenced and have it in subject matter and things like that. That's cool. I like the idea. I don't know if it's possible, but it should be.
Well, it's possible. The question is it done?
So it is possible. So
oh, I'm sure it's possible. I mean, anything's
like
possible.
Very possible.
It's just the computers and stuff.
We'll look into it.
Go ahead.
How much did it cost to create this film?
Basically, in real costs, film's about $1.2 million. There are significant donations and in-kind things in there, but that's what the film cost.
And did you pay your subjects?
No. Nobody got paid except for the filmmakers. And my wife would question that statement.
Melissa, go ahead.
Can you talk about your funding sources and selecting the title?
The funding sources were mostly individuals who believe in the climate change is a big problem and they want to get a positive message out. They liked the idea that we were being positive. If I show you the promotional material that we wrote to raise money, you'd see that we pretty much stuck to the game plan. So we have 2 grants, one from the Lemelson Foundation and one from the Seabury Foundation in Chicago. Otherwise, it's all individuals. And we formed a 501c3 so that we're not for profit. So that's the structure we chose to do. Your second question.
The title.
The title. Everyone we knew, we asked about it. This was the one that made me laugh. And the trouble with the title to me is it doesn't say solution. And so we always knew that we would have a tagline. We have to come up with that. So I really came up with the title early on. And I spent 3 years looking for I came up with the title, and I spent 3 years looking for the tagline. And the tagline that we're working with right now is a climate change movie, a climate change solutions movie that doesn't even care if you believe in climate change. That's the one we're working on.
Yeah, the narrator's voice sounds very familiar to me. I'm wondering if you can tell me who it is.
His name's Bill Curtis. He's done a lot of work on A&E. He just did a whole campaign for AT&T.
Oh, okay. And I'm wondering how much you fretted over picking a narrator, because I imagine that'd be very important.
Yeah, we tried for the superstars, Tom Hanks, George Clooney, and just didn't get there. And Bill Curtis, not only has he got a great voice, but he actually walks the walk. He made a film about climate change in the 80s, and he has a grass-fed beef company. And if you see the whole film, you'll see that that cattle grazing properly can actually be a great source of sequestering carbon. So there's a lot of things, but what was funny was he was watching the documentaries, he was narrating it, and we were in this piece that was shot in, when we were in the land use section. He goes, I shot that. I said, well, I got that footage from Conservation International. He goes, yeah, we sold that to them. I actually shot that footage 20 years prior, so that was kind of fun. So that's... Yes, sir?
Yeah, you actually may have shattered one of my illusions. Am I to conclude from what you say that Michael Moore's movies aren't objective?
He's the only one I know who makes objective films. Yes, sir?
Maybe along those lines, could you talk about the difference in not necessarily talking about any specific film between documentary filmmaking and propaganda? And again, not casting aspersions on anybody, but just is there a difference, given what you said?
Well, there were times when I was making this film that I was like, boy, I sure am a cheerleader for a certain point of view. But as I discovered how many people are coming at this point of view from so many different places, evangelical churches coming at this point of view, defense coming at it from energy security, national security, I realized that, I thought maybe this is going to be a bigger piece than that. Propaganda, we're going to have to define it, I guess, which is, to me, propaganda is it ever based on truth? Maybe it is. I always thought of propaganda as just a bunch of lies to get people to do something that they never would have done. What's your definition of propaganda?
Well, I think there may be a kernel of truth in propaganda, and then something's done with it to try and manipulate the beliefs or the actions of other people.
Right.
And again, it's not necessarily probably always a bad thing, but it's just a question of if you look at Germany and propaganda then, it was kind of in some ways documentary as well, and it is used as documentary.
Like Leno?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, beautifully shot.
Yeah.
With a very specific point of view. I guess all filmmaking really can be propaganda. I guess, really, because you can manipulate anything. And it's just a question of, can you research what they've said? Is it true? Have they talked to enough people with different points of view? I guess it's, yeah.
As can print journalism. That's, again, not throwing stones in the glass house here.
I'm sorry?
As can print journalism.
Right. So. Yeah, so I guess any journalism, any storytelling, anybody who's giving you a story, where are they coming from? When I started reading the newspaper, I was reading it because I liked Doonesbury when I was in high school. And that's what got me to the newspaper to start reading it. And then I realized, as I was reading articles, that sometimes, if a bill was coming up or something, I would just wait to read the article about what got passed, because all of it was just conjecture anyway, and just, it's an interesting thing. How do you maneuver yourself through media? I could see people saying the word propaganda with this film. I actually have had people say that. I don't think anyone's going to die from this movie, but I can see where you would come from that if you said, you guys are just talking about one thing and one thing only. Personally, yeah, it's just an opinion.
You had said that when writing a script that the narrator read, that you try to get 3 sources to provide you with that information before you put it in the script.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like you're going for journalistic standards. You're trying to source your material, but at the same time, you're saying you don't know what objectivity is. So it sounds like you're kind of making a distinguishing between journalistic approach and objectivity, not necessarily, you're saying they're not the same thing.
Well, what I'm saying is in filmmaking, even if you, like, yeah, we wanted to have our facts accurate. We wanted to have our science accurate. We worked really hard for that. We showed it to a lot of people to make sure. I could just walk you through the film of how that piece of narration changed and that one changed and where that piece of information came from. That being said, the way I'm presenting it is still a subjective thing. I'm putting music on it, you know, and I am weaving in a few jokes here and there, and I gravitated towards characters who were funny. So that's all the subjective stuff. So yeah, we're trying to be as accurate as possible. So I just want to make sure people know that I'm telling them this is not an objective movie. And I guess it kind of goes right to all the way down to subjective road. You could go to propaganda.
And just to follow up, then what about people you interviewed? Did you fact check what they said?
Yeah, as much as we could. As much as we could. Let's see. We didn't. I'm thinking out loud right now. There are things in the film that we try to substantiate, but we let people sort of live on their own comment as well. So I don't think we have 3 sources for everything everyone says in the movie. We were very specific about what we said, for sure. Like Richard Branson at the very beginning of the movie says, the Arctic could disappear in 10 years. Well, that's not everyone's going to agree with that. But I let him say it, and we kind of had that, we let people say what they were going to say. We made sure what we said was accurate. But we still did a lot of research on what they said.
Got one last question. Judith?
I was just going to comment on the propaganda question. Leslie Fiedler, who may or may not be familiar for many of you, but he was a very extraordinarily well-respected literary critic. Work started in the 50s, 60s, that whole period, was very concerned with the issue of propaganda and the definition of propaganda. And one of the things he said, and I think the article was in the Atlantic, but I don't want to be held to that, was that propaganda is when you come across a particular truth that doesn't fit your narrative and refuse to include it.
You come across a particular truth that doesn't fit your narrative and you refuse to include it?
Yes.
Okay.
And that when you do that, that's when you're in the game of creating propaganda.
Got it. Got it.
Any last questions? Can I ask, like how you chose, like which technologies and things to include? I mean, it seemed like partly what you're looking for was something where you could show some individual action and impact or something, but I noticed there was a kind of a wide variety of like timelines of technologies and the type of technologies.
Yeah, and there's more in the film, like plug-in hybrids. We tried to find things that could be happening within the next 5 years. We tried to not stick to things, like we didn't talk about fusion. Fusion's got this 20-year out thing, it's been 20 years out for a while. But we really, we wanted to sort of give a broad overview of this issue. We knew we couldn't include everything. And that was tough, because I wanted to. I wanted to have a film that included everything. But, so then it just became down to what technology did we find was viable from all of our research in making the film. For example, we interviewed Shai Agassi, who's got a company called A Better Place. And what his concept is, it's a fascinating concept, is batteries for electric cars take a long time to charge and wear out faster than people want. So his idea was create battery stations where you just swap out the batteries like you would fill up at a gas station. You get a new battery and you drive off. And I was just blown away by that idea and worked really, really hard to interview him. Almost flew to Paris for an interview. And we interviewed him and we got their footage back, and I did more research, and I realized that his idea is very cool, but it takes an enormous amount of infrastructure. To where you'd have to, if it was built in California, you would have to build one of the stations every 40 miles up Interstate 5 and up the 99. And I love the idea, but I realized I've only got a certain amount of real estate of time. And the plug-in hybrid idea, the fact that you can plug in a car, it charges up, like say if you're using wind power at night to charge your car because there's no way to store wind power right now, then your car's a battery. You go to work, you plug it in, and the grid uses your car's energy during the peak hours. It's this great two-way thing that I thought was very interesting and compelling and doesn't need as much infrastructure. So that's the one we put in. So again, subjective, completely.
I have to wrap this up, unfortunately, now, but thank you, Peter. This was really fantastic. I should note, for those of you who are local, that there will be a screening of Carbonation this fall. Do you have a date yet? No. Rhode Island? Okay, so there will be a Rhode Island screening this fall for Carbonation, yet to be determined, but keep your eyes open for that. And also tomorrow, we will be hosting our last lecture for the week, and that will be about energy policy. And we're very pleased to have Senator Sheldon Whitehouse joining us tomorrow to talk about this. Clearly, this is something that has been getting a lot of attention lately in Washington, and we're looking forward to hearing what he has to say about some of the options for comprehensive energy policy. And the senator has to leave by 11:30, so we'll have Q&A very quickly with him. And then the second half of the lecture is going to be by Professor Dennis Nixon of URI. He is the Associate Dean for Research and Administration here at the Graduate School of Oceanography and the Professor of Marine Affairs, and an expert in the legal issues surrounding oil spills. So Dr. Nixon is going to be talking about the legal repercussions of the Deepwater Horizon spill. This will be a really interesting kind of flip side to the talk that we're going to hear from Senator Whitehouse tomorrow. So please come back and join us tomorrow.
I just want to add one thing. If you'd like, you can sign up at facebook.com/CarbonNationFilm. If you want to know where we're playing, we'll have it all up there. Or sign up at carbonnation.tv. We'd love it if you did. Thank you.